this was about as bizarre and as easy as it gets.
So the number for me was a number that would allow me to never have to work again.
I feel like we got top.
I went from a sale of $500,000 to in debt.
$192 million.
This is Built to Sell Radio with your host, John Warlow.
So once a year, you go to the doctor, right? They take your blood pressure. Maybe they prick your finger and they take a little blood and they give you a sense of your cholesterol level. Maybe if you go to one of those fancy healthcare facilities, they get you to run on a treadmill for a while, see how your heart's doing. You get a checkup. The same thing should be true of your business. When we look at your business through the Value Builder score, we're going to look at it through 8 key drivers that acquirers care about. Whether you want to sell your business immediately or in 10, 20 years from now, these are the 8 factors that business buyers care about. Knowing them now will help you maximize the value of your business going forward. Just go to valuebuilder.com and take the questionnaire. Hey guys, next up, you're going to hear from Tommy Berretz at Berretz on all the big social platforms. Tommy started a company called Texas Aquatic Enterprise was the name, or TAE. They were in the business of maintaining swimming pools, which on the surface is a relatively commoditized business. But have a listen to the way Tommy differentiated the business through his safety policy, which is a key way that he built a sellable company. He also went about hiring salespeople that sold the key value proposition or the point of differentiation. He got a CFO in place to handle the numbers. He did a whole myriad of things to get the business ready to sell. He was essentially taking himself out of the equation, which is, as you know, the first ingredient to building a sellable company. He got 5 offers for his company that ranged in value. One was very high, one was very low, and he ended up going with one slightly less than the highest. And he'll tell you why he did that. Here to tell you the rest of the story is Tommy Berretz.
Tommy Berretz, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks for having me.
You were in the swimming pool business. Tell me about that. What kind of company did you guys have?
So we had a commercial swimming pool company, and basically, so it's based in Houston, Texas, and every neighborhood in Houston has a swimming pool because it's so hot in Houston. And they hire companies like us they contract us out to take care of their swimming pool, their lifeguard needs, their cleaning, their chemicals. We did pool construction, renovations. So basically anything that dealt with the swimming pool, we would do on the commercial end, like Rice was a customer of ours. So we dealt with universities, municipalities, HOAs, all those types of swimming pools are the ones that we dealt with.
Okay, so you have residential pools on one side. You were not dealing with those guys. It was the commercial, local community schools, universities, high schools, et cetera, communities, municipalities.
Correct. Like we did do some residential stuff, but it was all like friends of friends, like, hey, do you mind taking care of my stuff? But for the most part, 99.9% of our business was all commercial.
And what was your business model? How'd you make money?
So, like I said, like HOAs would contract us out for an entire year.
I don't know what an HOA is. What?
Homeowners Association.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Homeowners Association would contract us out and we would sign a contract for a year. And so obviously during the summer months, we were extremely busy because you got everybody wanting to use the pool. You got a lot of pool repairs. You're doing a lot of construction work. And then you've got the lifeguarding aspect, taking care of the pool. So they would contract us out for on an annual basis. And sometimes like the bigger contracts would sign us for 3 years or a 5-year deal to where we would have the longevity of the contract for a longer duration, which was awesome for us. And there was an out in the contract that way if they weren't satisfying our needs or we weren't satisfying their needs, that, there could be a cancellation clause in there.
Got it. Okay. So you've got these contracts, these service contracts that you're working with. How did you sell your service? Did you have a sales force? Did you personally do some of the selling? What was your model?
Yeah. So when we first started, I did all the sales. Well, my business partner and I did like everything like every entrepreneur does on a startup. You do everything under the sun. You wear a bunch of different hats. But over time, we started getting a sales team involved. And it was probably one of the most imperative game-changing decisions we ever made, because if you're the one doing the sales and you have an issue in the operations, so then you go focus on to rectify whatever issues you have, then all of a sudden you have no more sales coming in. So then you're trying to play this balance between operation and sales, and it's just never ending, and you're pulling your hair out by the end of the day.
Yeah. What's the secret of hiring good salespeople?
So what I would recommend is always hire somebody who has experience. And there's a bunch of personality tests that you can give to people. I think we gave the Winslow profile, and it'll actually tell you before you even hire the person whether they're actually going to be good at sales or not. And I think what a lot of people do, the mistake that people make whenever they are going to hire salespeople, is they want to train somebody and put them in that position because it's cheaper to do that. But from my experience, I always like to get somebody who's smarter than me and hire them and put them in that position. That way I don't have to babysit them and overlook everything that they're doing, and they're telling me what they're doing and what they need for me to help them perform their position. So experience.
Was it a competitive bidding situation? Like, would an HOA go, did you have direct competitors and say we could either go with Tommy's company or 3 other providers?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a small community, but it is competitive. So whenever you bid on something, obviously you're going to have 3 to 5 other people you're bidding with. And the struggle is everybody does just about the same thing that you're doing. So, you have to be competitive with what you're offering, and your pricing has to be within the market rate to be able to actually win over a bid.
How did you guys differentiate yourselves?
So one of the biggest differentiating factors was our safety policy, because drowning kills a lot of kids in the United States every year. It's a huge, huge statistic. Back in the 70s, drive a car without a seatbelt on and a beer in your hand and nobody said anything to you. It was all of a sudden that people started looking at statistics and saying, wait, all these people got in car accidents and these are the ones that died, and they weren't wearing a seatbelt. So we need to make this mandatory, because as human beings, we're not always that smart. And so they mandated that we had to wear seatbelts and you can no longer drink and drive. Well, so we started looking at the statistics and we said, this is, what are the cause of all these drownings? Well, you've got kids that are going to swimming pools that don't have any type of safety policy besides their parents, and a lifeguard sitting in a stand. So what we did is we created a child safety policy that if anybody who came into the facility under 42 inches of height, they had to wear a life jacket, and they got a red wristband that indicated to the lifeguards this kid can't swim, and the parents also got a red wristband. If the parent opted out of wanting to put the kid in the life jacket, the parent had to stay within arm's reach of the kid at all times. And they had to get in the water with them, and they both had a red wristband. And if there was an incident where the kid struggled at any point and the parent wasn't there, then it was mandatory that they got put in a life jacket. And then we also had, if they didn't want the kid in a life jacket, we had them fill out a waiver saying that, hey, we told you the risk of your kid not being in a life jacket, and we want you to assume that risk by knowing that we explained what could possibly happen if they didn't wear a life jacket.
How did that safety policy help you in selling your service?
Oh, it was awesome. Like, we would tell people about it. And that was on the lifeguarding side. There's some other things we did on other sides, but like, people loved it. They, at first there would be a little bit of a pushback, like, well, I don't know how the community is going to react, because as a parent, you don't want somebody else telling you how to parent your kid. Well, my kid's going to be fine. And so there's that little bit of a struggle, but we're the experts. We're the ones that see the statistics, and we're the ones that are trying to make your facility safer. So when you sit in a meeting and you show them that you're investing safety into their facility, then people start to trust you a little bit more. And obviously when we first kicked that off, there was pushback. People would not want to have their kids in a life jacket, but overall, and I can say this, while I owned the company, I never had a drowning, and it worked out excellently.
Fantastic. That's got to be the worst, absolute kind of worst nightmare. And Tommy, I want to get into the sale, but before we do, I'd be curious, was there part of you that, I guess part of the challenge with a lot of business owners is that there's always this sort of concern in the back of our minds that something is going to go wrong. some customer's going to be unhappy, something we're going to deliver is not going to work, something, and we can go to bed at night and you're totally fine. But there's a little part of our brain, whether it's 5% or 3%, that's still churning through that concern or worry that something it sounds like in your case, someone drowning was the catastrophic thing that you worried about. How much did you worry about it? I'll ask that first, and then maybe I'll ask a follow-up.
Yeah, so that was always in the back of my mind. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. John who's in the industry, and he's like the guru. And he says, owning a business like we owned, you're probably going to have a drowning every 7 years. That statistically is what it shows. And so we owned that company for 12, and that was always in the back of my mind. And so there's kind of like a push and pull. You want to get out and sell the business because you don't want that to happen. But then on the other part of you doesn't want to sell it because you want to make sure you're there to implement the safety policies to ensure that, it becomes an industry standard. And so, it was always in the back of my mind for sure and that's why we always wanted to take care of the lifeguards and make sure that they were well trained, well taken care of, because if you have an employee that you take good care of, they're going to take good care of you.
And was that wanting to be alleviated of that stress of one day having to deal with a drowning? Was that in any way part of your decision to sell the company?
That definitely was a part. That was a part of it. When we initially started the company, we always wanted to sell it. That was kind of our initiative, like, hey, let's start a company, let's build it, let's sell it, let's see if we can do it. But then as time went on, that was definitely a factor of, all right, we've had the company for 12 years. So far, we haven't had any real incidents. And so maybe it's time to kind of bow out before something catastrophic were to happen.
And if something had happened, I'm assuming you had insurance that would have covered you for that?
Oh, yeah. We had insurance.
That's a big deal, right? Yeah. But it was more the psychological burden of that as opposed to the financial, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. And it's because, I'm a new parent right now. So like, I can't even imagine like having to go through something so detrimental and so devastating. And so when we owned the company, that was always in the back of our minds. It's like, man, you don't want, not on my watch. I don't want that to happen on my watch. And I don't know how you move on from that and continue to own a company if something like that were to happen, because at some level you would have to feel like it was your fault. Sure. You're the owner of the company, and that happened when you're the owner of the company. So like, I would take responsibility for that. Like, where did I go wrong with training my employees or making sure they had what they needed to make sure that this didn't happen?
Yeah, I think it's so underestimated and not talked about a lot, is that there's this sort of like psychological tax that business owners pay in being a business owner, that at the end of the day, you are where the buck stops, right? And if a product breaks, somebody gets hurt, and an employee gets injured in whatever capacity, it's on you. And I think after years, as it did with you, it does weigh on you. Anyways, let's get on a happier topic, because we're talking about these heavy things. So chatting with Sean, our producer, she tells me that there was a period where you decided to sell, and you had a valuation come back and it wasn't what you hoped for. Maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Okay. So like I said, originally we wanted to sell the company. And so we were building it. And we were, the owners were involved on a day-to-day operational aspect of the company. So I actually went to our CPA and I got a book value of the company. And we've been working this thing. I think we're maybe 8 years in at the time, 8 years in, and I go get a book value of the business. And I'm super excited because I'm thinking, man, it's going to come back. It's going to be millions and we're going to sell. And she gives me a book value of less than $100,000.
Yeah.
And I was.
So do you want to define book value for folks who may not understand that terminology?
So she gave the book value based on what our books currently are, the position of our books currently, how much cash, how many assets we had. And a lot of times you'll get a book value based on, like, if you want to buy a partner out, people will get a book value to go, hey, look, this is what we're currently worth right here at this time. And they don't take anything into account, like contracts. If we have 5 years worth of contracts that worth $7 million, they don't put that into account. It's just basically what your books are showing current date, and that's it.
Yeah, generally book value is the value of your hard assets, right? So like the trucks, the life jackets, all the stuff that you own, what is that worth on auction or at market rate? And it's usually a fraction of what the company's actually worth if you like to sell it, presumably if you've got ongoing profit and contract and so forth.
Yeah, it's like, you're right. It's like at auction at a deep discount. Well, when that happened, I was like super distraught. I was depressed. I was like, man, here I have been busting my butt all these years, and just to find out, because I didn't understand what book value was. So I didn't get the concept at the time. So I was like, okay. And sell this company. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to build it to where I don't have to be here. So the book value being as low as it was actually a blessing in disguise, because then now we're starting to position it to where, all right, we need to start getting the right people in play, so we don't have to be here on a daily basis, and we can turn this company into a passive income asset. And so that's what we started doing.
Your accountant told you, look, Tommy, I mean, as long as you're deeply, ingrained in the operations, it's certainly not worth anything without you. So we could sell the life jackets and the trucks, but there's nothing there. What you've got to do is get it to run without you personally, and then we'll be able to sell for more. Right. That's essentially what she said. Okay. So what was that process like? Like, what was the process of de-Tommyizing your company? What did that look like? What did you start with?
So we just started looking at each department and understanding what we needed to get, who we needed to get involved in each department to make sure that it could run on its own. You have your operations, you've got your sales, you've got your accounting. And so one of the first things we did is, this is so funny. We used to cut checks, and we would go look in our bank account. All right, so we've got this much money in the bank account. All right, we can cut the check for this. We can cut the check for that. We weren't actually using our books. You would go in our books and you could see some stuff, but it wasn't very accurate. So we initially all right, we need to get this under control to be able to understand to where we can read it off. So we hired a CFO to go through our books, and she completely revamped everything we were doing. She laughed as she was going through it, like, I can't believe you guys were running this way with all your employees. And we're like, we didn't know any day, we're new at this, we're new entrepreneurs. And so we started with the accounting, because the accounting is such a cornerstone of your business. And I think that that's something that so many entrepreneurs neglect. It's kind of like, I just do accounting because of tax reasons, and that's the only reason they do it. And they're not looking at the future thinking, at some point I might want to be able to sell this, and I'm going to have to submit 3 to 5 years of accounting data to whoever wants to buy this place. And then I'm going to have to answer questions based on the data that I give them. And so we started with accounting.
To be clear, Tommy, did you hire a fractional CFO or a full-time 40-hour-a-week CFO?
Full-time 40-hour-a-week CFO.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And it was, so as it transitioned, it turned into I'm an owner of the company, and I'm asking her, a few years later, the stuff that I can buy and what I can do. And she's telling me, Tommy, you can't buy that equipment right now. It's too expensive. We're on a cyclical downturn. You need to wait till, March of next year to be able to buy. You can buy it then. We'll have, this much money to be able. So she was giving me the information to be able to run the business, which was completely different than the way it was running before, looking into the bank account going, oh yeah, I think we can buy it.
Right. So you professionalize your forecasting, your bookkeeping and your financials. What else did you do to pull yourself out of the operations?
So I want to say the biggest thing, so that was huge, the accounting, because then you could actually see what the business was doing. You can make decisions based off of that. So the other thing that we did is we started hiring a sales team. That was absolutely enormous, because now the company was generating income on its own. And I think a lot of business owners struggle with hiring a sales team because they feel like, well, nobody can sell like I can. Nobody can do it like I can. And the truth of the matter is if you have competitors, there's people out there that can do it just as good as you can. And to be honest, if you hire a salesperson, in my opinion, if they can do 80 to 85% of what you can do, you've got a winner. You've got someone that's going to produce income for you and you don't have to worry about it. So that was a huge game changer, is hiring salespeople, man. Whenever I talk to entrepreneurs and they say that they're the ones that do all the sales, I'm like, man, you need to really reconsider that. You really need to look into getting someone who's experienced in there who can sell for you.
Great stuff. So anything else that you did that people listening might, because I think a lot of people listening, Tommy, will be like right in the same spot, right? They know their company is a little too dependent on them personally. Maybe they've done some work on the books. Maybe they pulled themselves out of the selling. Is there anything else that you did that really got you out of the day-to-day kind of doing?
Yeah. So hiring people who were in charge of, the different departments of operations, to where, they would go run operations, they would go deal with all the issues. And it transitioned me from working in the business to working on the business, to where I've got this macro view of everything that's going on. And now I feel like I can actually maneuver and give a vision of where we're headed and what we need to do to get to where I know we can be, versus, being stuck inside the business, working day in and day out in the operation and the sales, to where you have no time to look at anything else. And you're just kind of floating along, and you don't have a 1 year or a 2 year or a 5 year plan of where you want to be. You're just trying to make it to the next week and trying to keep your head above water.
Got it. So at what point did you decide that you were ready to sell this company again, once you made some of these changes? Was it a triggering event, or like some straw that broke the camel's back?
So here's what happened. It started out where like the hours that I actually worked on the business started to diminish. And so I wanted to get out of the industry. And once I realized, I'm like, wow, I'm still showing up to the office, but I'm really not working on the business that much. I'm spending about 10 hours, some months, maybe 10 hours a week, but most months it was like 10 hours a month. And I was like, I've removed myself. At one point I went away for like 6 weeks. I went to New York for 6 weeks. And when I came back, the business had grown. And I was like, wow, this thing is actually moving forward and I don't have to be here. And so I told my business partner, I said, hey, look, I'm going to get the company valued. I just want to see what it's worth. And I said, if it's actually worth selling, then I think we're going to move forward with it. If it's not, if we still get the same ridiculous low value, then we'll just keep pushing forward and we'll keep growing the business, and we'll make it to where it's just a completely passive income entity.
And so what's your relationship with your partner? Are you the majority shareholder and can tell him or her what you're doing, or wasn't it something you had to discuss with your partner?
So it started out to where we were 50-50 partners. And then I think after 3 or 4 years, we ended up hiring a vice president, and we gave him 10% of the company. So I then owned 45%. My other business partner owned 45%. And the vice president owned 10%, and he was like the one that was like really like running the place. Like he was in there making moves on a daily basis. And we even got him to where he really didn't have to work there that often, which was great. So I was the one running the business. I was on the business side. He was doing some other stuff. So pretty much like the decisions, he wanted out anyway. He had wanted out for a while. The guy, his name was Chris, owned 45%. He had been wanting out for like 4 or 5 years. And so when I called him, he was like, I have been waiting for you to make this phone call for like 5 years.
That's funny. So did you go get it valued? What did it come back at?
Yeah. So we went and got it valued, and we did it through a separate valuation company, and we got the value back. It came back over 7 figures, low 7 figures. And I remember calling him. I was like, man, we're selling this thing. I was like, this time is now. Let's do it. And so he was definitely on board, and the other owner was on board. And I started looking for brokers. I was like, how
were you valuing it in your own mind? Did you have a formula you were using to give a sense of what it would be worth Did you have any sense of sort of the way companies like yours were being valued?
I did know a little bit. Like I knew that we had added up all of our contract values, and we were a multi-million-dollar company. And
when you say added the contract value, you were talking about like a 3-year contract at whatever $100,000 a year would be valued at $300,000. Is that what you mean by valuing the contract?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And we would take, like whatever the expenses were, we would generally take that stuff out because they're not going to pay you for that. They're not going to pay you for the expenses. They're going to pay you for the profit. And then I looked at all of our assets. And so, I kind of understood how it would go, and it actually came back more than I thought it was going to come back at. And so, it was pretty exciting,
Was the valuation company using a multiple of your profit or your income or your revenue? How did they approach the valuation?
So they valued it based on discretionary earnings. Discretionary earnings, for people that don't know, is based on what the company's profit is, and then any of the owners, salaries, anything that the owner, would pay for or buy. Like if, we would go on a trip every year that was $20,000, that would get added back into the bottom line of what the value of the company is worth. And I'm saying that discretionary earnings, where they add the owner's salaries back and whatever they spend. The problem with it is if you're in the business and you're doing a job, they don't add your salary back because they know that they're going to have to, once somebody buys it, they're going to have to put somebody in your position, and your salary is a wash. So that's why it's so important to get yourself out of the day-to-day operations to where you don't have to be there, because then all the money you make actually goes back to whoever the new owner is going to buy the company. So it's imperative to get yourself out of the business.
So what multiple of your discretionary earnings did you think it was worth, ballpark?
So I thought maybe 2. I thought maybe 2, but it came back at 3.4. So I was happy with that.
That's fantastic. So you had this valuation done. You had it done, and you were happy with the number. Then what was the next step for you guys?
So then the next step, I started interviewing brokers, and I started talking to people. Read your book.
Good.
And
it didn't totally screw you up then, did it?
I read your book and I was like, man, I don't think I'm going to do this now. I'm kidding. But so then we started looking for brokers, and I don't even know how many brokers I called, left messages, and I think I had like 5 or 7 call me back. And I did like a little interview process with them. First of all, I wanted to know if they had ever sold a company like ours. And I went through broker after broker after broker. Some brokers would talk to me for like 5 minutes. Other brokers would talk to me, maybe for 10 minutes. But then I had one broker talk to me for 30 or 45 minutes, went through the entire process with me, told me everything that she was going to do. And I felt the only caveat was that she had never sold a business like ours. And so there was another broker that I talked to that had. And so I was kind of going back and forth, which one, do I want to work with? And so I called the other one back and he didn't give me the time of day. So I went with the one that gave me all the valuable information over the phone. And so I didn't know this whenever I got the initial value. I didn't know this. When you hire a broker, generally they'll also value your company. They won't utilize your value, your valuation that you got, because they want to do their own. I guess in some cases they will, but in this specific case they wouldn't, which was, at first I was kind of like, well, kind of worried again. I'm like, well, what if she comes back with a value and it's way lower, So, but she did a value, and I think her value was within like $80,000. It was like super close. Wow. Of what the original one was. And then I told her, hey, by the way, I got another value and here's how close they are. And she was like, well, can I see it? I was like, yeah, here, you can see it. And so I was really happy that it came within such a close number of what the original was. And so then the process was from there, you sign the agreement, the listing agreement. And I always have, anytime I have to sign something, I send it over to my attorney. I'm like, hey, can you look over this? Because something that I didn't know that I know now is that when a company makes an agreement, oftentimes they call it the standard listing agreement or the standard agreement. So in your mind, you're like, oh, just a standard agreement. But then when you go through it, there's nothing standard about it. It's their standard agreement. It's not the standard. And so my attorney calls me. He's like, man, there is nothing standard about this agreement. And so we go through it line by line. He's like, hey, you need to change this. And like, I mean, there was quite a few notes. And so, and I told her, I said, hey, I'm going to send this to my attorney and have him look at it. And she was like, yeah, that's great. And so I sent it over to her with the revisions that he was suggesting. And we jumped on a phone call, and she was like, here are the things that, I will change this. No problem. I'll take this out. This is a non-negotiable, because my attorney wants to try to get the best contract possible for me. And she's like, this is non-negotiable. So there was things like, if we sold the business within 3 years of hiring her to someone who was within her network and she wasn't representing, we still owed her a commission, which makes sense. If you introduce somebody to the buyer and then things kind of fall out for a little bit and then you're not representing them anymore, but the same buyer comes back. So I didn't have an issue with that. I'm like, yeah, I get it. You probably deserve the commission since you introduced me to the person who's going to buy it. So there was certain things within the document that we had changed. And that's why I always tell people, man, when some standard agreement or an agreement of any kind, send it to an attorney to have them review it and give you some insight of what's actually in that document.
Can you give us an example of a term that you asked her to change that she did go ahead and change?
Trying to remember. So something that she did change. So because all the owners own some sort of like assets outside of TAE, there was some terminology.
Aquatic Enterprises, yeah.
Right. And so there was some terminology in there that like was kind of convoluted, very ambiguous about if we sold some sort of assets that we would owe a commission, which was especially scary for one of the owners owned a lot of real estate. And he was like, he honed in on that. And he was like, man, if we sign this and I sell a house, she can't tell me I owe her 10%. So it was something that she conceded on. And I forget exactly, we changed the wording to where it would just be applicable just to the business. And it wasn't to where, if we sold other assets that were outside that business venture, that she would actually get a commission. So that was one thing that she changed. And in the beginning, she didn't want to change that. But then after we explained it, she was like, okay, I can see where you're coming from.
Got it. Okay. So you do this deal with the broker, and then what happens? Do you get offers? Where do you go from there?
So you do the initial listing agreement, and people always ask, like I get so much advice about a broker. Like there were so many people like, don't use a broker, don't use it. You're paying them for nothing. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have the network that they do to introduce me to people. So when people ask me, would you recommend using a broker or not? I'm like, well, how fast do you want to sell your company? If you don't care if you sit on it for the next 5 years, you can try to sell it by yourself all you want. But if you want to sell it quickly and it's an actual sellable business, then you're going to want to get a broker involved. And so the process went, we did the listing agreement. We had to send her a bunch of documents, a bunch of financials and projections and everything. So it was over the course of a few months. And then what happened is before she actually listed the company, she had like a select list of potential buyers. And so before she listed it, she sent an email out, hey, look, I have this company. It's a viable company. It runs on its own. It's got absentee owners. And she got it approved for, I forget. It was if someone wanted to buy it for a loan, but I forget who it was through.
Something called SBA lending. Is that what?
Maybe it was SBA lending. So she got it. It was
our listeners, Tommy. SBA lender is specifically the United States, where basically the bank will guarantee the government will guarantee a bank loan for a buyer to buy a business, and it makes it much more marketable as a small business because the buyer can get financing to purchase them.
Right. And you are correct. It was SBA lending. That is correct. And so she sent out this. One of the other caveats I had too, when I spoke to her, and I think this is an important thing to talk about, is I told her I don't want to do an earnout. I was like, I don't want to do an earnout. I want somebody with the cash up front. I don't want to stick around and work in the business and have to meet these stats that they're expecting to be able to get my money. I've worked the business. I don't want to do that. And so And basically an earnout is, where you stay within the business and you have to meet whatever is in their contract, a revenue number for them to pay you a percentage of whatever, wherever you say the revenue is going to be over the next 2 to 3 years. And I didn't want to do that, because what ends up happening is in an earnout is if you don't meet those, then you end up, you sell the business for a fraction of what it's actually worth. And so I was very
broker's response to that. When you said, look, I don't want an earnout. What did your broker say in response?
understandable. She's like, I don't think you have to. She's like, you have an actual sellable business. So I don't think an earnout would even be on the table. And so back to the email. So she sent out an email on a Friday night, and within 5 to 7 days, we had 5 offers on the business. People that were interested.
Were these emails sent to people who owned pool maintenance and service contract businesses, or were these just passive investors who wanted? Like, who was she sending these emails to?
So they had a qualification process to where if you want to look at a business, you had to qualify. You had to show them that you had the cash to buy a business. You had to, and there were some, acquisitions firms that were interested in buying the business where they just buy different kinds of businesses and they diversify their business by buying different kinds of businesses. I want to say there was 3 of those that were actually interested in buying the business. And then there was like some serial entrepreneurs. And so she had a list of people she had already qualified. So she knew, I'm going to send this out to the people that could actually pull the trigger, because I wanted a cash buyer. I didn't want to, I was okay with financing, but I said, I would rather go through all the cash buyers first. And then if somebody can come up with the down payment and then can go get the rest in a loan, I'm fine with that too.
Got it. And so what was your reaction when you read the 5 offers?
I was blown away about how quickly, because initially she told me, she's like, hey, this is not a fast process. This is going to take 12 to 18 months minimum. So I don't want you to, lose hope, if you're in this thing for like 8 months and nothing's really happening. She's like, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not like selling a house. And so I was like, I already had it in my mind, 18 months. It's going to take 18 to 24 months to sell this thing. And so when she came back and she was like, look, we already have people interested. They want it. So we started setting up meetings to start meeting with everybody. And
Tommy, did she put a price on the business when she sent those emails, or did she invite people to put
yes. So she put, I believe she put the sale price of the business. Actually, no, she didn't. Yes, she did. She put the sales price of the business and she put the revenue, but they had to inquire to get any more information. Like they couldn't just go in and see any financials or anything like that. I had to approve whoever we gave the financials to, like, hey, yeah, you can send them the financials. That way they can look at the business.
I know we can't talk about the specific number that you sold for, but so she had a listing price on the business where she said, this is the price that we want for the company.
Yes, just it's similar if you were to buy a house, you go and look and see the market value. Oh, this house is, $350,000. You would know going in.
Okay, that's helpful. So you get these offers, and what were their sort of price points like? Like, did they all say we'll pay your asking price? Did they offer less, more? What was the?
There was a combination there was people there. I actually got offered, one person offered me more than asking price, which I thought was weird. And it was an acquisitions firm. And then there was there was offers that were oddly enough, the lowest offer came from a competitor who is like in a bunch of states all over the United States. And they wanted to do an earnout. And their offer was actually like so low and so ridiculous that the broker was like, this is embarrassing that they would even send this. I mean, she's like, I have to show it to you. And she basically I think I took a call with the CEO just to tell him he was ridiculous. But yeah, funny enough, a competitor was the one that wanted to do an earnout, and I was just completely uncomfortable with that. But yeah, so the pricing was all over the place. Like the offers were all over the place. They, were right at, one was over, one was a little bit under. And so then the process started to where we got to actually go meet with the people that were giving the offers.
And what was that like?
So and this is where it gets pretty interesting, because when they're looking at your business based solely on financials. And that's why it's so important for people to get their financials in order and what they have in their asset column, what they have listed as an asset versus an expense. You know, like I remember I told my CPA at one point, I was like, hey, I want to list my website in the asset column. And she's like, well, you can't do that. I was like, well, why not? It's an income producing asset. I want to list it in the asset column. And she was like, well, you know, you're going to pay more in taxes if you do that. I was like, I don't care. I'm trying to sell my company. I want to make the value worth more. And so she was like, okay, if that's what you're trying to do, then we'll list it in the asset column. So it's kind of important to understand what you're going to put in your asset column, what you're going to put in your expense column, because when you go sit down with these people who want to buy your business, they're going to pick your accounting completely apart. I mean, they'll ask you questions. I mean, there was like a $77 car rental fee somewhere in what we gave them. And they were like, well, what's this for? I'm like, yeah, I went out of town. I put the rental car in the business. I'm like, okay, but they drill down and they ask you, so why do you have this listed as an asset? Why are you listing this as an expense? And they're going through all your accounting first, because they want to make sure that you have tight accounting that's giving them accurate information, so they can, you know, give you a real purchase price, because they're going to tell you, yeah, I'll offer you your full asking price. But then when they sit down with you, that's where they're going to start going, okay, well, I see this. Well, you did this, and this within your books, and we don't agree with that. So we're going to lower our asking price to whatever it may be. And then they get into your business, like how you run your business. And it felt very, very personal to hand over. You know, it'd be like if I'm asking you right now, hey, let me see your bank account. You'd be like, yeah, I don't want to show you my bank account, but you're exposed. You know, you're in a vulnerable position. You're showing them, they're going through your book, seeing all the mistakes you've made over the years, and you're embarrassed about that. Yeah, I made. Well, what's this? What's this right here? Well, I hired someone to do the accounting that didn't really know what they were doing, and I thought they did, and they didn't pay. They didn't pay the $80,000 worth of payroll taxes. And so then the IRS came back and they fined us. And, you know, so you're like going through like reliving all your mistakes over the years, which it's funny to talk to you about now, but at the time you're just like, man, you know, but
I'm only laughing because I'm feeling the heat myself.
It's very vulnerable. And so, and then, like I said, they're getting to the operation, like who runs stuff, who are your key employees, you know. And I thought this was kind of funny. I asked my broker, I was like, hey, so when do I tell my employees? And she's like, the day after you sign the paperwork. And you know, he's walking in the office. I was like, yeah, it's a good idea.
How'd you feel about that? Some people feel a little bit uneasy about not telling their employees until the check clears.
Yeah, I felt really uneasy because most of my employees had been there for a long time and they worked for me for a long time. And that was when I spoke to every single person that was interested in the business, I would echo the fact that, look, I love my employees and I want them well taken care of. That's like the most important part of selling this business for me, is to know that when I walk away, you're going to take care of our employees that have been there for a long time. And funny enough, we actually took less money from a serial entrepreneur because he wrote this letter about how he's going to take care of the employees, how he's going to, you know, see that they were well taken care of and that he wasn't going to get rid of anybody. And so we took less money because I was like, I'm selling the business. I feel like I'm doing them an injustice. And some of them took it really hard once we did tell them that we were selling the business. I mean, really hard. And so it took less money to be able to, you know, sell it to the right person.
What percentage off did you accept to lower bidder? Like how much lower were they on a percentage basis than the highest bidder?
I would say maybe like 0.5%.
Okay. So not 20% less, or it was slightly.
No, because they would have been hard to walk away from 20%. That would have been like,
yeah, for sure. And so you said it was hard for some employees to hear. Take us through that day. Where did you do it? Where did you announce the acquisition? Who was most upset? What was making them most upset?
So I called each one of them into the office. I should rephrase this. I didn't tell everybody. It wasn't like we came into the conference room and, you know, I sent out emails and stuff. I took the key employees into my office one by one, and I sat them down. the saving grace that I had was over the years I had talked about, well, someday I plan on selling the business. That's kind of what we want to do, so it wasn't like all of a sudden, what do you mean you're selling the business? This is crazy. Like, when did this idea come up? So they already were warmed up to the idea in that aspect, but I brought them in. I said, hey, look, I just want to tell you something. Let's sit down. Like, I really appreciate everything you've done over the years. And, we're going to go ahead and sell the business. And we have looked through the potential buyers, and we're picking the one that we know that's going to take care of you guys in the long run. And I even told them we're going to take less money to be able to make sure we get the right buyer in there who's actually going to, honor the whoever buys the company doesn't have to honor your agreement with the employees. They can come in and change it and do whatever they want. But the buyer was like, yeah, I'll honor, like some employees that worked there for so long, they had worked up 3 or 4 weeks worth of vacation time, and so because they earned it, because they worked so hard and so long, and I didn't want somebody coming in going, oh, now that I'm taking over, you only get 1 week of vacation time now, because that would be a huge morale buster to do that in addition to already selling the business.
Got it. So what was your way of ensuring, or did you ensure that the serial entrepreneur who wrote this letter is assuring you that he would take care of your employees? Did you actually legally paper any of that assurances, or were you just taking that individual on their word?
So that was one thing that we discussed, is being able to like get him to sign something, but the broker was like, I don't think he would. And it's kind of like, maybe he comes in, he doesn't mesh well with somebody and they're giving him a hard time. It'd be like you buying my house, but when you do, I'm like, yeah, but you can't change the tile in the bathroom. I love that tile. So for the next 5 years, you got to keep that tile. You'd be like, yeah, it's my house. I paid for it. And so I think it's kind of one of those things where you might be able to get away with it. You might be able to get someone to sign something, but in this case we didn't. And we were basically taking his word. Like, I trusted the guy. I had met with him once we picked him as the buyer. I had met him time and time. Like, I was on the phone with him almost every day for 2 or 3 months before he stepped in, like just going over stuff, him having questions, because he had no experience in the industry. So he had questions of how to run the company and what to do. And so we would go to lunches. And so over time, I actually got to know the guy, and I trusted him. And what were the deal terms that you agreed to? You mentioned you didn't want an earn out. What sort of terms did you get all your money the day of closing, or did you agree to some sort of terms? Yep. Actually, no, we didn't get all the money day of closing, because he had, I want to say, like, I forget how we did it. So we had to stick around for 30 days. So once we signed, we thought we were going to have to stick around for like 6 months or a year, but he was like, oh, I'm only going to need you for 30 days. So I'm like, that's perfect. Well, we need to be there for 30 days. So he put down, on the day of close, he put down, I want to say it was like 70 or 80% cash that we put into our bank account. And then he was going to pay the remainder in 30 days, which we were kind of uneasy about that part. But the saving grace of that is what we did was like, okay, so because he didn't buy our entity, he started his own entity and just took all of our assets, all of our employees, all of our customers, which is smart because he's avoiding any kind of liabilities that we may have as a company. And he's just taking all the assets and dumping it into his shell corporation. And with it, so the deal was, at first I was like, no, I'm not going to do that with all my money up front. I was like, that was the deal. And he was concerned about operating capital. He was like, well, I'm like kind of stretching myself buying this all cash. I'm worried about operating capital. So we agreed that we would get we added up all the accounts receivable for the following month, whatever that number was. And we're like, we'll just collect that money. So we'll subtract that amount. We'll collect that amount of money to where you don't collect it. But if at the end of 30 days, if it's all not paid, you have to pay the remaining balance of what you owe. And he agreed to it. And so I was like, okay, I'm willing to do that just because we have control of the accounts receivable for the next 30 days.
Got it. Excellent. And that was the only holdback, this kind of 30-day holdback.
Yes. Right.
It sounds like a great deal. Is there anything that you would look back on and do differently if you had it to do all over again?
If I had to go back and do anything differently, it would be implementing getting the right people at the right time. Like we held off on getting salespeople. We could have grown that company so much more than we had grown it already if we would have got the right people involved sooner and not been involved in the operation for so long and got our accounting straight. Like now that I understand like the power of accounting, like how you can forecast, what you can do with the knowledge that's in those books. From the very get-go, it would have been the first person I would have hired would have been a salesperson. It would not have been me out there selling. It would have been a salesperson. I would have got some sort of CFO. Obviously, it couldn't have been full-time, but I would have got somebody involved immediately that could take care of the books and understand where we're flying instead of flying blind. And just along the way, getting the right people involved, getting the people that were smarter than me involved in the beginning, because we always would hire people that we had to train for the position and we thought it was easier, but then there was no longevity there. So we were like going through people, but then when we got the people that were the right people, they were the ones running with the departments. And we're like, wow, they know what they're doing.
Going back to people for a second, the new owner, how did they choose to deal with the vice president who owned 10%, who was really running the company? Did they keep him or her on? How did they structure their agreement?
No, everybody that owned a percentage got bought out. And I think that he wanted to step in and actually run it. And so our general manager was running a lot of it, running the majority of the operations. So, and at that point, the owner that had 10% he wasn't spending 40 hours a week within the business anyway. Okay. And he could step out of the business and it would still run. So there was no concern there. The other part that the new owner wanted is he wanted consulting for 12 months, which we gave him. We're like, yeah, if you need anything, I might not come up to the office, but like, if you want to call me and ask me questions. And he utilized that a few times and asked me, hey, here's the situation. What would you do? And, I gave him like, hey, here's what I would do if I was you. I don't know if it's the answer you want, but this is what I would do in your position.
And is that consulting? Did you have a governor on that and say like it's up to X number of hours or X number of days, or was it sort of unlimited? Did you have any sort of?
Yeah, so it was limited. It was definitely limited to a few phone calls. It was, where I didn't have to be there in person. So yeah, I think that was an important aspect of it, because I was like, well, I don't want him buy the business, and the next thing I know, I'm like working in the business, helping him, get it to where he wants it to be. So yeah, we put a governor on that to where it couldn't be all that. It was like an everyday thing. Like I want to say the specific verbiage was a few phone calls a month for a few hours, and he never ever used up, 2 or 3 hours a month worth of that time.
What did he do to ensure that general manager was going to stay on through the acquisition? What sorts of approaches did he take there?
So we took all of our key employees, and I want to say we had, like, if you want to say key employees, I think there were 6 key employees that place really needed. So we sat them all down one by one with him. We all had conversations. We warmed the employees up to who he was. He kind of explained where he was coming from. And one thing that he did that I thought was pretty smart, he didn't like step in and like, hey, I'm the new owner and you're going to listen to me. He was just kind of like, hey, I don't know this industry. I'm just going to kind of watch what everybody's doing. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be in your space asking you, what you're doing and how you're doing it, to kind of get a grip on how the company is running. And then there's going to be some stuff that I might implement over time. So he didn't come in and just, all right, we're going to do things this way. He just kind of got the feel of everybody. And I think he won their trust over because he did that. He didn't come in as a dictator and have, a huge ego, which I thought was great on his part. And I did feel like he was really warm with the employees when we sat down with all of them.
And now with a bit of time and distance, is there any part of you that regrets the decision to sell, or how do you feel about it today?
No way. That was such a learning experience for me. That was such a, so gratifying to know that we started a company with the intent of selling it. And I remember I used to tell people, hey, I was working at a bar when I started it, which is ridiculous. And I remember telling, I'm going to start this business. And, the goal is to sell it at some point. And I talked to that friend after I sold it. He was like, dude, I can't believe that you actually built the company and you actually sold it the way you said you were going to do it. And I was like, man, it didn't seem like it for a while. But yeah, I definitely don't regret it. It's very gratifying to know that we built something and that legacy's living on beyond us. And I think that when owners get frustrated with their business and they don't want to do it anymore, they automatically just want to shut it down. I'm like, man, you've got assets here. You've got things you can sell. Yes, it's going to take a little bit more time than you want, but at the end of the day, it feels good to drive down the street and see one of our trucks drive by and be like, we started that thing,
That's awesome.
Legacy.
I know people are going to want to reach out, Tommy. So where is there a website you want to point people to, or do you do LinkedIn connections? Where can people say hi?
So directly, they can find me on Instagram, Facebook, whether platforms on pretty much Instagram and Facebook are the main ones. And I have and it's at Tommy Berretz is my handle on any of the social media profiles. And then I have a website, sellableincc.com is a business that I have that, we help entrepreneurs who want to prep their company for sale. We also help them with sales and getting the right person in as a sales executive to be selling for them to way it kind of gets them out of the business. So any of those places.
Taking that lesson that you learned about the importance of salespeople and helping people hire and train those salespeople as well. So at Berretz and the major social platforms, and we will put those links in the show notes at builttosell.com. Tommy, it was great to have you here. Thanks again.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Built to Sell Radio with John Warrillow. For complete show notes with links to additional resources, visit builttosell.com/blog. John is the founder of the Value Builder System. To find out how to improve the value of your business by 71%, visit valuebuildersystem.com. John is also the author of Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You, and The Automatic Customer, Creating a Subscription Business in Any Industry. Connect with John at facebook.com/builttosell or on Twitter at John Warrillow, WARRILLOW. Thanks for listening.